Imagine pushing yourself to your physical limit and then deciding to go farther beyond. This is where my story begins. It's called December 14th, 2013, and I'm arriving at my first Spartan race. And I remember looking around being awestruck and saying to myself, no matter what, I'm going to finish this race. Even if I have to crawl, I'm going to finish this. And this is my challenge, I have to do this. So I get into the pit, and they start doing their countdown. 3, 2, 1, and then I run out that gate, and after 30 seconds of running, I notice that I'm way ahead of everybody, and I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be great. and then I start getting in my stride, and then I find like this pothole or something in the middle of the road, and like completely kills my vibe because I roll my ankle and lose all my shoes and all this stuff, and then I'm like, no, I told myself I'm going to finish this race. So I keep going and going, and then some random person comes out of like the woods and says, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. And like, follow my finger, and I was like, why? And then like stand on one foot and like try walking in a straight line and like all this nonsense. And during this whole entire thing, like these other racers were passing me by, and I was like getting really irritated here. And then I go on, and then I go against my next obstacle, which is this barbed wire crawl. It's electrified, and it's supposed to be like a mental obstacle because you're just trying to figure out. So I'm going to go and force myself through this barbed wire that's 300 yards long and get shocked and zapped by car batteries. It's like, this doesn't make logical sense. And after that, I was like sort of like jittery and like just like vibrating and just like all sorts of nonsense. And then the next big obstacle was called this burden carry, which is where like you carry this like big bucket of gravel, and it's like a 100-foot hill, and if you drop this bucket, you have to go all the way back down and start all over again. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all the way to the top in one strike. Boy, was I wrong for trying to do that. Because once I finally got to the top, I was like gassed and I was like starting to hallucinate. And I swear I saw Jesus up there. And he was like, come towards me. I was like, and something like jerked me back, and I was like, no, I made a promise to myself. I will finish this race. And then I also started thinking of my father, because me and his relationship are like built upon. We are like strong men. We take care of our business. We don't need like depend on other people. And so, even though I was like half hallucinating about seeing Jesus a few seconds earlier, I just like started going back down the hill. And then at the third obstacle, which was at mile 13, this thing called a muddy rope climb, and it was 3 stories up. And I start climbing. I finally hit the bell, and then also I black out, and I land on my back from 3 stories. And I like wake up, and everyone's like looking around. I was like, what happened? Like, why are you guys looking at me for? And I was like, you just fell from 3 stories. Are you okay? I was like, I fell from 3 stories. I feel fine. And then the final obstacle was where you had to like read this passage, and it was in Israeli. And then you had to translate that verse, remember that verse until the end of the race, and then repeat it back, or you had to have this penalty of 30 burpees. And if none of you have done like a burpee before, it's one of the hardest things you will ever do in your life. So I run, I get to the very end, and then they're like, what was the verse? And I'm like, at mile 18, the final mile, I was like, what was that? Hotel California, Broadway Street, Nevada. And I was like, I don't know. So I just sucked it up and did that, and then at the very end, they have this thing called the gladiator pit, which is where these like huge men with like heat bags try to keep you from getting across the finish line. I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna go and tackle one of these guys, and just went underneath them, like lift them up and use them as a human meat shield, and I crossed the finish line. I was like, yeah. This is where my story ended, but this is where my father's story began. The day after that, on December 15th, my dad was rushed to the hospital because he passed out, and we were trying to figure out why, and they figured out that he only had 4 quarts of blood in his body, and the average male is supposed to have 16 quarts of blood. And they were like, what's wrong with him? And we couldn't figure out what was going on. But then they were like, there may be a possibility that your father has cancer. And we were like, what? This isn't supposed to happen. And then they went through all this testing for like a couple of weeks, and they were like, your dad doesn't have cancer. His marrow's clean and everything. Then the next day, I walk into that room, and my father, my mother, and my sister are all crying, and I was like, what's going on? They said that, and then they said that we made a mistake. Your dad has marrow cancer. And I was like, wait, how did this happen? We got the results mixed up. And I was like, how did this happen? And they said, I asked them, was there anything we can do? And they said there's an experimental treatment with like 70% chance of passing and getting all the stem cells and everything to work. So we're like, yeah, we'll do that. And throughout this process, I've never seen my dad so weak. And I mean, it's like, I'm used to him being like, hey, let me take care of this, let me do all this. And I'm like, in my head, this is like, this isn't my dad. This isn't the man I've grown up with for 18 years. And then like after they give him the stem cells, I started playing Malcolm more. You can't hold us, like to remember some good memories, and because I just didn't want to like think about it. And then after the stem cells, like his body was rejecting some of the cells, then they started fitting, and he started getting cold shivers and all this bad stuff. But now he's home, and I'm so happy. But we still have to do some more treatment. But hopefully everything will work out, and I'll have my dad for at least 10 more years. So.